Give it just a few minutes for everyone to kind of get in the room, and then we'll get started. All right, we're going to take off and get this thing started, everyone. Hello, I am Angela Diffley. I'm the co-founder of the Restaurant Technology Network. We are thrilled to have everyone joining us today for what we deem as one of the most exciting days of the year, which is an official launch of many months of work group effort by the industry to create standards. The first of the restaurant technology industry standards that the industry has seen coming out of the Restaurant Technology Network today. So I am thrilled to be joined by a panel of key contributors, of whom I'll introduce in just a moment. Just want to welcome everybody to the program today. We're going to have an exciting hour, jam-packed hour here of explaining what exactly we worked on, what this team was instrumental in developing for the industry, and how you can get your hands on the files, specification files for the customer record data standard that we are talking about on today's call. So first, I just want to welcome everyone. We're going to give a shout out to our RTN Platinum members really quickly. We're going to introduce our key contributors here, and then we will have one of our key contributors, Robert Peterson here from Oracle, will be driving the conversation, telling you all about how this work came together, and more importantly, what's contained in the specification, what it is and what it isn't. So with that, we'll flip to the next slide, and we'll say a big thank you to our Platinum members. Without these Platinum members contributing their time, resources, and technology talent to the RTN, we really wouldn't be able to do the work that we do today. So it's important for us to acknowledge the industry support that's behind these initiatives. And these are the Platinum members of the RTN currently. So thank you to all of the members who are on board with RTN, and particularly to our Platinum members who support us and move this work along. So we're going to talk really quickly about the statistics about what went into this work group. So our work groups are really like industry think tanks, whereby restaurants and suppliers join together to solve restaurant challenges. That's really what RTN is all about. That's our mission. In this particular work group, which was called Customer Record Data Standard, and it was our phase 1 of this work, we had 17 months of duration of time and 452 volunteer hours. I want to stress this is all volunteer hours, right? This is not the folks on this call, this is not their day job, as we say, but they certainly pour their heart and soul into the work because they really believe that this is the way the industry will advance. This is the way that things will start talking to each other more smoothly, and everything will start to be integrated, right, as we move forward. We had about 13 participants on each call as an average, and 6 key contributors with whom I'm joined today on this call. 2 restaurants, 2 suppliers, and 2 consultants, which is a really nice mix of key contributors who stuck it in for the long haul and got this work across the finish line. I want to give a big shout out to Sandy Angel and Patrick Dunphy, who are our strategic partners in the work group. Everybody's clapping on the call because they really are the driving force behind leading this team. Sandy Angel is a rock star who basically helps us really come up with the data fields and all of the specification detail that goes into the standards. And Patrick Dunphy is the CIO, both for HLA and for RTN, and leads our work groups, championing our work. So thank you so much to the contributions for those partners that we have there. With that, I would like to introduce our key contributors. We have Stephen Ellenson from AWS. Hello, Stephen, and welcome to the call.
Hello, thank you for hosting.
Tim Guerrero with PF Chains. Thank you, Tim. Hello.
Hello.
Nice to have you here. Judge Hutto with Mod Superfast Pizza. Hello, George. Thank you for your contributions. Mark Mulinax from Consult R. Hello, Mark.
Hello. Thank you.
Nice to have you join us. Robert Peterson with Oracle Food and Beverage. Hello, Robert.
Thank you. Thank you.
And last but not least, our Christopher Siebes, who's with Results Through Strategy. Thank you for joining us, Christopher.
Thanks, Angela. I'm very happy to be here.
Happy to have you all. With that, I'm going to hand this off to Robert Peterson, who has really been sort of our core champion of this work group and many others that contain data. I think Robert is a self-professed data geek, and he won't mind me sharing that with all of you. So Robert, thank you so much for not only your time and energy, but your leadership. And with that, I'll let you kick it off and get this conversation started.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Angela. And we have an open forum here as we do with all of our work groups. So if you've got some questions along the way, feel free to put them into the chat. I will try to manage those as we go through. As we talked about this towards the end of launching, and certainly in our rehearsal last week, one of the things that came up is, what is this not? And this actually was part of the guiding principle. And I'm going to ask you, Stephen, real quick, just to down at the bottom, we have this tagline here, and I'm hoping that you brought this to our work groups, and I know it wasn't yours originally, but you brought it to the work groups, and if you could explain a little bit what that tagline means.
Sure. I'm fortunate to be surrounded by thousands of brilliant solution architects. And so from their thousands of years of experience, what they tell me is allow the systems to have the business logic, the business intelligence, and make all the deterministic things, and just create simple, dumb pipes that allow that communication to be sent down to the next system that's smart and intelligent and can interpret the information. And so in essence, we want to put all of the business logic on the systems and make our communication channels super easy, streamlined, simple, and straightforward.
Excellent, thank you. And I know that saved us in a lot of the work groups, because we would, as we like to do, start building systems and building solutions, and we had to stop and say, wait a second, all we're doing is sharing the data, sharing the information between the systems. So with that too, one of the things that came up quite often, especially because we're dealing with the customer record, is PII, or the personal identifiable information. And there's quite a bit of compliancy around that globally. It's quite different too. Some region to region, it's different. So what we set out early on is to not manage any of the compliancy. We also, with the spirit of, not building a CRM or not building a CDP, also kind of took that as a tagline. So I put this here because I think it's important that we, it was so easy to get sidetracked. And so that's, I look at the 17 months. I didn't think it was 17 months, but I'm sure I was contributing to that, because there were times when we were nearly ready to launch phase 1, and we got into deeper discussions, which probably took at least another 6 weeks, if not 12. With that though, we did address marketing opt-in and opt-out. And I know that both George and Stephen, you've talked about that often. And George, I'm going to call on you just to talk a little bit about kind of your experience as a brand and why it's important to be able to manage the opt-in and opt-out from a marketing standpoint.
For us, we don't want to harass our customers. They may have a phone capable of SMS messages. They may be happy to receive emails. But just because they can receive SMS doesn't mean they want to receive it or be notified of it. So we give them the control, and that kind of implies what else we can do with their info that they've given to us.
That's great, thank you. And Tim, I'm going to call on you too, as our other brand in here too, the importance of managing the opt-in and opt-out.
Yeah, I know, getting back to compliance, we learned a lot with CCPA and how many people wanted the, not their data shared. So it changed our whole practice on how we looked at things. And the people who collect the data and the marketing teams who need the data, it also refocused them on where we can get the data and how we do. And whatever tools we're using to capture the data, it's also helped us in making sure the customer has the ability to opt in, opt out, and sign up for whatever they need.
Excellent, thank you. And you did mention an acronym in there. I'm going to try to be as mindful as possible and to name all these. So you mentioned CCPA, which is the California Consumer Privacy Act, which more than likely will be a national compliance issue or statement moving forward. GDPR is out there. I know that Patrick has a lot of information and experience with GDPR. So those were two of the compliancy standards, the compliancy agencies that were brought up in our meetings a lot. I mentioned CRM and CDP, so a customer relations management platform, and then of course the CDP, which is quite not quite new, but much more new than CRM, which is a customer data platform. So ultimately, the data that we collect and that we manage and that we share between the systems will benefit these these solutions, the CRM and the CDP, and things that we don't even know about today. All right, I'm going to jump forward to what the specification is. And I always like to kind of preface this at the highest level. This is all about all of the attributes around the guest information, gathering as much and managing as much information around the guest, as well as the events between the guest and the brand. Also, we added in all the associations that a guest may have with households and with clubs. So we try to get as comprehensive as possible, hence the 17 weeks and the 452 hours. And we also utilize both the tables and the data elements from our other work groups, specifically the menu sync and the transactional data. The transactional data has not been released. It's got to be the next one coming out, but there's quite a bit of interplay between all of this. And not only do we want to know who the guest is, but we want to know what they're purchasing and where they're purchasing it. And that speaks to the comprehensiveness of this. Is we believe we put together a schema that allows us to capture every event at every specific location in every particular channel, and to be able to share that. So let's talk about pain points. Let's talk about what we're trying to solve. So George, I'm going to call on you again from a real world experience. Using this moving forward, and as you were spending that time in the work groups, what did you bring? What did you want to see solved, and what are you looking to do with this as you move forward?
From my point of view, which is very much from the restaurant's point of view, and us having to integrate a lot of disparate systems, having a single standard to work to means that in my private life, I say I'm being lazy, but I want to be efficient and only have to write an ingestion one time and just maybe point it to a different source. And being able to send this information on to maybe someone who gives me some demographic information on the customers allows me to do that too. And I don't have to do something unique each and every time, which is all too often.
Oh, that's great. I mean, one of the things that came up is the data that's both collected and shared between the systems, with it not being congruent, that it created a lot of heavy lifting both on your end, and Tim, I know you had shared some of that as well. Mark, I'm going to ask you kind of a personal experience question. You joined our work group a little bit later than all of us. We were kind of in the groove and building and developing and working fast, and you brought in some great world experiences with CRM and some of the data fields there that are quite standard. So first of all, can you just talk a little bit what it was like to become a newcomer in our work group, and then talk a little bit about what you brought to the work group and what you saw coming in and just trying to get caught up with where we were with everything?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I kind of jumped in midway. I think the first couple of sessions, kind of listening and, kind of sitting back a little bit and figuring out what was going on. One thing I found as we continued was the diversity of all the talents that individuals brought. So I think when I jumped in, I'm not sure who was participating before from a technology, marketing, some of my background, but I felt that we had a good group, a good diverse group, and everybody had a little different piece of the pie that they were contributing to. And like you said, the CRM and the data, I think a lot of us, quite a few of us on the calls, when we were talking about things, we were searching, also looking, hey, let's see what other systems are doing. How are they called? What's the nomenclature? Is that an optional or is that a required field? Is it going to be free text or not? Just thinking about everything downstream. And so for me, I really enjoyed it. It was a nice break from the everyday work, right? And it was an opportunity to spend some valuable time with, key players, and also have something, to contribute and feel good about, aside from, our day-to-day jobs.
Thank you, Mark. That was the thing I found too. It was great to, learn so much from everyone and be able to contribute, and just a great cohort. Christopher, so I have some questions for you, and I talked earlier about wanting to build solutions, and you have an incredible background with developing systems within our industry.
You mean I'm
and I know
old, Robert?
you are quite experienced and knowledgeable, and also you have shared within our work groups how you kind of did a whole 180 on the data itself and being open with the data. So I want you to talk a little bit to that. And I also want you to talk a little bit, because you touch so many brands now as a consultant and see so much, probably more than all of us. Could you share a little bit where you see this benefiting brands and our industry as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that in common with my competitors, including you, Robert, historically we charged a toll for access to the POS, and that really I did a 180 when we developed Xenial and decided that we would provide access to the data freely to anybody that cared to take advantage of the APIs, and I believe that that's really the way that the industry has decided to go now. And I think the majority of systems today allow free access to the data. And it's only by doing that that we can develop the standards such as this one that we've developed for customer data, and be sure that we can all share data from system to system without putting in artificial barriers to make that harder for people. So, I think there's lots of uses for this, for all kinds of customer data, whether that's customer data emanating from a reservation system or from the point of sale or from a CRM and flowing to all kinds of systems, whether that's a CDP or it's flowing to the reservation system or to the POS. So I think that facilitating that exchange of the relevant parts of the customer data, we've designed a schema that's pretty comprehensive in nature so we can exchange lots of data. But as Stephen said, it's the pipe is there and the smarts are in the systems that choose to consume that.
Excellent, thank you. And along those lines, you said it at the end, we've had discussions in our work groups about some of the systems that collect the data, and either why not or how come they're not sharing that data with others. And one of the discussions that came up is well, there's just no way to do that. We either the systems don't speak the same language, so the data can't be shared. So what this data schema will also do is to kind of break down those barriers, where if we do have a third-party system that is not encouraged or is not sharing data readily, and we'd like them to, meaning we as an industry, that at least there's a method to do that. So the argument no longer exists that there's no method to share the data, so that's why it's not being done. Stephen, so I'm going to ask you kind of a slightly different question, but along the same lines. And I want to, talk a little bit about not just what we build here, but how we all work together. And we'll talk a little bit more about it on the next slide as well, too, when we talk about the methodologies. But one of the things that's been really advantageous for me is to be able to work side by side with other industry peers, competitors and non-competitors. I mean, you and I obviously come from different cloud companies. We work together great. Could you talk a little bit about what it's like to work on a weekly basis with others in the industry?
Yeah, of course. It's absolutely invigorating. So I hope that passion and energy comes through. I think if you see the conversation that's coming from all of the participants, there's universal truths that are emerging. So I'm going to use that term, universal truths. Like collectively, we all want to do a better job of enhancing our customers' experience. Now, if you're a brand, that's the end customer that's purchasing the menu item and the product. If you're a technology service provider, that's the restaurant brand itself that's consuming your software and your solutions. in the same breath, we all want to increase our operating efficiencies, right? We know there's extremely low margins in our business. And so anything we can do that allows us to do more rapid experimentation, quicker integrations, speed to market, global scale, we all favor those kinds of things. And that's exactly what a standard like this leads to, right? And so the end result is we're all trying to answer the universal truths in our industry. And I think that's one of the reasons why we work so well together. It's the old rising tide lifts all boats kinds of scenarios. We all want to see the restaurant industry viewed through an even more favorable lens. And that's really what we hope to deliver with this initial launch.
I'm so glad you used that analogy, because I use it often in my sales pitches, which is, why is Oracle involved with RTN? It's because with all tides, or with all high tides, boats rise too. So excellent. So let me jump ahead. I've got, I could stay on one slide and we could just talk the entire time, but now I believe that we all think a little bit differently. So here is a kind of a capture of some of the data schema, kind of in this, technical format. We also have some use cases on the next slide that we built, and they're just very simple use cases. So depending on what type of learner you are, we also have this schema within a Swagger-like tool, so you can literally look into the bits and bytes of it. I'm going to do another shout out to Sandy, because one of the from a methodology standpoint, in essence, imagine us, a group, getting together every other week or every week, talking about all kinds of stuff, and then trying to figure out how it's all going to work together, and then to map it to an actual data schema. And that was Sandy's job, and she was incredible at it. She asked a lot of questions, and she let us go off on tangents, and she would pull us back, and we would finally get to where we needed to get to. So on this slide, I want to talk a little bit about some of the comprehensiveness and the depth of the data. And also to talk about the methodologies. And so one of the things that came up was I mentioned these simple use cases, but there were at times we had some, I'm going to call them like an edge use case, where we would, hypothetically, what if this happened and this happened? And lo and behold, and George, I'm going to call on you for this, there were some edge cases that, even though they were hypothetical or theoretical, they actually had occurred or were occurring at that point. And so from that, we were able to, add a table or add an object that would then allow us to accommodate that. So you're on the spot, George. Could you provide to us, maybe one of the edge cases or any use case that you thought was relevant that spurred some conversation?
On a simple customer respect side of things, the edge case of allowing them to tell us their journey, how we should approach them, or how we should address them. But
Hey, George, could I get you to lean into the mic just a little bit?
yes, sorry. Is that any better?
That's much better, thank you.
Sorry about that. I was saying that, one of the edge cases that we at Mod had to deal with, or decided to bring in, was allowing customers to designate their gender. It's a time of respect, and we want to respect our clients and our customers. So we gave them in here the means to choose more than male, female, and just other. Give them a little bit more to work with. And I think that respect, in many ways, tying it in with any type thing to social media and all the rest, can only benefit us as an industry as a whole. So that was one of the main ones that cropped to mind as you tagged me while I was reading chat.
Thank you. So Mark, I'm gonna ask you on this one too. So one of the things that came up often too was, how do we communicate to our guests, not only what their preferred channels are, but recognizing, and some of this what you brought with with traditional contact information from a CRM, was recognizing that there is a large audience that their preference is to be communicated to through social media, and the construct of the social media contact is quite different than a typical phone number or email address. Can you talk a little bit about what we did to accommodate that and what we did to future-proof the data schema?
Sure. I think we often went down the road of developing customer personas and kind of getting into those conversations, which we backed off of that, right? Because we're just doing data and flow and pipe here. But just expanding in general, understanding there's different systems out there that's going to be collecting different information, different data. Obviously, customers are going to provide some and not provide other information depending on what they feel comfortable doing. So we really just tried to expand and cover as many of the options that potentially could be out there. And also future options, right? Something that may not exist today that may come in the future, that at the end of the day would be valuable data, whether it be for marketing, customer loyalty programs, you name it. And obviously that's coming from the POS, loyalty apps, social media, and all these various places. And I think the idea behind this was keeping it very, structured in the fact that that could happen here, could happen here, could happen here. The smart system will figure that out and just really keep it data pipe central. Does that kind of answer? Or?
Yep. No, that's exactly it. I mean, one of the things we recognized is even in the last 5 years, the type of data that is collected in order to contact your guest it's a totally different structure, with the social media handles, and now as we move in the metaverse too, there's construct there that we're not even familiar with or aware of, and we just wanted to make sure that we had the ability to add multiple forms of contact information, and more importantly, to be able to capture the events of when they use those particular platforms to engage the brand, so that we can make sure the brands engage them back in the same way. I did have a question come in regarding the development of the standards and the solution providers, if they're going to rebuild their APIs, or they're going to build some type of translation layer to sit in between. We've had some discussion around that. Obviously, the goal is to get adoption as quickly as possible. So getting all of the data records out, the schemas out, and then having the solution providers start to either build from scratch, which I don't think will happen in all cases. I know there are a couple of them that are net new, so they're doing that. But to answer your question, yeah, most of the existing API layers will build some type of a translation layer in between, which ultimately leads, and Christopher talked to this earlier, as a solution provider, to be able to build one final translation API that then serves the entire industry would be wonderful. I think in a very long time frame, all the translation layers will go away and there'll just be one standard. And I'm going to look at other industries. We have arts and retail, we have GS1 in grocery. There was a standard that was put together by or for travel and lodging. All of those have become the standard now. So any net new platforms that are coming to play in that space are built along those lines there. So that is a really good question. Let's see. I had another question here. I talked about Sandy. So let's talk again about some of the use cases. And let me just jump forward, because I know I love this last slide, but this one here I think is a little more consumable by most. So again, these were some simple use cases that we put together. And the goal here is just to kind of to walk through some simple cases to see how the data interplays amongst all the different objects, and to see that the depth of even a simple use case, how this touches so much, and then moving between systems to be able to share this data. Christopher had talked about I think you called it the toll that was paid between systems in order to get the data in and out. So ultimately dropping that down, but then recognizing that even in the simplest of transaction or engagement with a guest, there's quite a bit of data that's passed, and the value of that data as well too. So Mark, I'm going to call on you again to just kind of talk a little bit about some of these and how they were developed.
Yeah, I mean, I think throughout the group, as we went on, we determined we needed to have some specific examples. I think Stephen probably played a pretty big part in a lot of this as well. But something as simple as a loyalty app, right? What the system enables them to do. Does the profile exist? Does it not? Is it a duplicate? Thinking through all those different scenarios and where the data could be coming from is kind of what we're looking at here, I think, with some of the examples.
Yep.
Does anyone have anything to add that maybe specifically called one of these out?
I would just add the context. Sorry, I was going to say that we envision it being event driven, and that's also one of the things we've heard from our colleagues and peers. So don't think of this as an old school like batch, nightly update kind of process. We envision where the systems will interact in near real time. So as soon as a customer either creates a profile, updates a profile, or makes the request, that information can be set through the data schema, and then all downstream subscribers can be updated in near real time. So think about moving your organization to become event driven and the power that will yield.
Yeah, thank you for that. That was a key piece too. And with it being event driven, we have captured time and date stamp on every single event so that the smart systems can go back and replay them when needed or if needed. I did have a question come through chat, and I know, Angela, you answered it, but I thought I would share it with the whole group as well too. So there was a question on the prior slide. So let me just go backwards here. There are some of these elements here that are marked as an existing object or an existing data element. What that means is that it does exist in either the menu sync, which was already released, the menu synchronization, and or it's in the transactional record, which hasn't quite been released, but we've also worked on that one. I think that's actually our longest work group that from a time frame standpoint. And it was interesting because the transactional work group, we're like, oh, this will be easy. We're going to figure out how orders are created and boom, we're done. And we ended up adding in all kinds of other things. So we'll have some lively discussion when we get to that one. But to answer your question, when it's marked as existing here, that means it's from one of the other work groups. Christopher, I want to give you a chance to talk about the use cases, and probably more importantly, some of the use cases that we didn't capture here in these four, specifically when we talked about some of the service types. Often we get kind of pigeonholed into thinking about counter service only, or if we talk about table service, we not as deep as we'd like. You have a great deal of experience in the table service space, and you brought a lot of great use cases to life as we work through this data record.
Yeah, so I guess I'm not very clear on what you'd like me to talk about.
Well, I'm trying to remember what they were, but there were some very specific use cases as we talked about identifying the guests in a table service environment. And what's so different there is the check remains open. We don't necessarily identify guests as they walk through the door.
Yeah. I mean, the opportunity to collect that information, I think, gets enhanced when all the systems are connected, and you can pass richer information from perhaps the reservation system to the point of sale, and maybe you can share customer preferences with the wait staff that you would not otherwise be able to share if these systems were not connected, and whether that's coming from we know who the customer is from the reservation system, and our CRM can tell us all about that customer. And I think that opens possibilities, because, as you said, we very often, historically, we wouldn't know who the customer was until maybe the end of the transaction, when they might have identified themselves as a loyalty member, or we know who they are when they pay their check. So I think that this opens up.
Thank you. No, and I wanted to highlight too is that the emphasis in the last 24 to 36 months has been around these digital channels, whether it's an off-premises order or even an on-premise order that's initiated digitally, where a guest is automatically identified if they're on their own device or they're ordering from a platform that in essence forces them to identify who they are before they place the order, and then the order is placed, and their, at least their credit card or their payment information is captured, and it's become an order journey that we're very familiar with and we're really excited by, just because we know we can capture the customer data. But as we looked at a lot of the independents and the traditional table service, that doesn't exist. We very rarely have the ability to have a guest identify themselves, to self-identify. And so what you mentioned, which is the table management platforms and the reservation platforms, the interplay between them are extremely important in a service venue that will always be here. And we want to make sure that the customer record accommodated every single type of service venue. Stephen, not that I've run out of questions, but I want to give you a chance to talk to use cases here too, because this is one of those areas that I felt as we got to the very end of, okay, now we're going to launch this. Let's come up with some scenarios. Let's try it out. Let's put something out there and see if we have all the data attributes we need. Can you speak to that a little bit? Because this is one of those areas where we ended up spending several more weeks because we discovered we had some gaps.
I think that the proof is always in the pudding. And so we recognize that this is version 1. And what we actually aspire to do is quickly get the version, 1.1 or 2.0, because it's when it's live in the universe that we'll actually get the most actionable feedback. But to that extent, we wanted to do our own version of test-driven development, right? Stress testing, performance testing, whatever terminology you want to use. And so we tried to pump as many possible use cases, scenarios, corner cases, difficult, challenging situations through it in order to make sure it wouldn't break. And we believe we've accomplished that. To kind of build a little bit on what Christopher said, the power in this is really what we hear from our brand peers, in that they want to be able to understand each consumer as an individual unit of one. And so if you've heard these terminologies of zero-party data, right, that's data that customers willingly provide to us: names, birthdays, phone numbers, anniversaries. Then there's the first-party data. That's data that we can observe from their behaviors, point of sale transactions, payments, and the rest. It's when you're able to piece all of those things together from all of your disparate systems, zero-party, first-party, that now you can actually form this really strong profile about the customer. And that's what we find our customers really wanting to do, right? I no longer want to do marketing based on these large segments or cohorts of customers. I want to know, I think it was George who was talking about, I want to know my individual mod customer, how they prefer to be referenced, their dietary preferences, like everything about them, so I can offer them a very unique service offering. And so ultimately, we believe that that's what this schema will help all of our restaurateurs drive towards.
Excellent, thank you. I received another question on chat, and I want to make sure I understand it. So I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to let the group kind of decipher this. So the question is, in the model, is there objects, or are there objects to store permissioning? I want my data stored only for this transaction. The data can be shared with other, and in this case, he says P.F. Chang restaurants. Any restaurant can have access to my info. So I believe what this goes down, and this may be where it moves to the smart system, but I'm going to present that question to the group to answer that about the permissioning of the data.
I think the quickest answer is you can use the mental model of, this is a schema that's designed for a brand and its service providers to implement within its own network and infrastructure. This is not intended to be a universal industry, meaning we're not all going to put all of our data on here and all be able to share it. So there's not an expectation that Mod Pizza customer profiles will be available for P.F. Chang's or for the Cheesecake Factory or anybody else. The idea is for you to implement this framework within your own ecosystem. So of course, you can absolutely implement, identity access management, record level, field level controls, and control all of your own data.
Excellent response. So you did spark something in me, but we were aware that there are organizations that own multiple brands, or they'll own multiple parent companies that also own multiple brands. So one of the things we worked on really hard was the ability to have associations between the brands and the brand's location, so that there could be marketing on a regional level, marketing within a brand, marketing across brands if the ownership is singular. Who wants to share a little bit more on that one? Because that one took a while, as I recall.
I mean, I can jump in here. I mean, I think an example would be like co-brands, right? Co-brand stores where, you know, it's in a C store or somewhere else, you know, aside from the brands that maybe own 5 or 6, right? That's a very simple way to look at it. So it's the same concept, it's the same customer. They're probably using the same systems, POS systems, we would assume. And so the idea is, you know, currently, you know, depending on where that data resides, right, and how it's utilized on the back end is kind of what we're trying to work towards, to show a framework to get all those disparate systems to be communicating real time, and then also be able to share across co-brands or other brands, for example. And I think the big thing is really getting into you know, specific marketing as the industry grows, right? And getting creative and allowing marketing to be creative with their ideas, right? And break out of the mold of, we've always kind of marketed to this region and we've got a new, you know, piece of food or chicken or what have you, to really get more granular and get more targeted. And then eventually, obviously, AI and all the other things that are, you know, going to be coming down the pipe. So I think that's kind of the idea behind the cross-brand marketing.
Yep, excellent. So before I transition to what I'm going to call the recruitment phase of this presentation, I want to make sure, just go around the panel, if there's anything additional, Tim, that you want to add to what we've already talked about, maybe something we missed that was a burning desire for you.
Yeah, you know, when we came up with these use cases, and we came up with several, and we even moved some to 1.2 or 2.0 to the next one, but this just gives a starting guide to brands to help decipher all the data that we get on a daily basis and from all the different systems that feed in. So this standard and these examples of use cases helps the marketing teams and the other teams decipher the data that they need to use to help sell the brand, improve our brand, determine what customers need, and to help our brand grow with this. By not collecting the data, you're out purchasing other tools. So now you have a different tool to collect all the data. But this just gives you a general understanding of, hey, this is the use case, these are the fields you collect, and this is how you feed it all in and decipher it. So I've, listening to all the calls over the weeks, adding what I could in there, and just learning about, what we need to collect and how we collect it. So, I mean, the use cases are a really good guide, and the standard is a really good guide for brands who want to start centralizing all the data that they have.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim. Christopher, any additional thoughts before we move into talking about phase two?
Shockingly, I don't.
That's all right. Well, there's always more time. George, any last minute thoughts?
Yeah, and it kind of ties into what Tim was saying. By going back to the opting in and out, you can do some more targeted marketing, and your marketing team can figure out where they're going to get the biggest bang for their buck. Which channel are they going to? And it's been a rough couple of years, so we need to make those bucks stretch as far as we can. So having this focus helps us do the right thing for both our customers and ourselves.
Excellent. Thank you. Stephen.
I don't want to steal from your recruiting drive, because I will definitely want to pile on that effort, but just that this is the most powerful demonstration of the beauty of the RTN community, right? We've always said, if only we could come together and do these kinds of things. And the reality is that we absolutely can. And so for all of my other peers and colleagues that are on the line, we want your participation in this. I think you've heard there's many other active work groups that are going on around KPIs, transactions, capability frameworks, maybe even an idea you have for another standard that we should have. Please join in the community. The more active you are, the stronger we all will be as a team.
Yeah, and the more standards that we put out, the more participation we'll get, because the brands and the different lines of business inside the brand will want to, get their 2 cents in and help out the best they can. I'm trying to recruit as many as I can from PF Chang's to help out, just so we can make sure that we have the different subject matter experts helping out in each area.
Yep. Excellent. So there's a QR code up on the screen now that you can scan to learn more about the next phase. So we have already actually moved this week. Yesterday, in fact, we started phase 2, and it was work that we started to do, and we recognize this is going to be a lot. Let's get phase 1 out there. I mean, I will say, and ditto what you said, Stephen, as well, is we welcome newcomers, we welcome the critics, the community at large. You know, what we do and then sharing it sometimes can be a little bit scary because we know we've missed something. We've been looking at this for 17 months ourselves and a slightly larger group. And it would be hugely helpful to have those of you in the industry consume this information, to read through it and go, wow, you forgot this, or what about that, or did you think about it this way? And that's exactly the type of people that we want. You know, it is so helpful to have more eyes on this. So with that, as we move into phase 2, these were some of the idea that was brought forth, and a lot of this has to do with hypersegmentation, a lot of the advent of CDP. We know we have a lot of solution providers. We have some on this call that are capturing this data now, and they're trying to weave it into the rest of the customer data. And so this data standard will allow that to happen in a much better way. Mark, can you talk a little bit about some of these? Because, you know, I look at the term psychographic, and I don't want to scare anyone off here, but, you know, these are some really neat terms here for you know, segmenting our customers for the brands to be able to engage them better.
Yeah, I think Stephen, I believe you brought that one out when we were on the call that day. You know, we're just really trying to cover, like you said earlier, kind of going from the basic, what people typically think demographics are, and then actually what they could be or what they actually are, depending on which system is collecting what, like we talked about before. Stephen, do you want to give the definition of a psychographic?
I think you're trying to say I'm psycho, so I'm not sure how I should handle all that. The essence, again, I'll present is like, we've talked about the power of having a really strong customer profile. So that's awesome, right? We can engage with them as an individual. The dimension that this starts to bring in, and what we hear from brands, are they want to understand the consumer's dining occasion and why they're choosing that dining. So now you start to think about it, right? Why I might order a meal at 11:30 on a Wednesday could be very different than the meal I order at 4:45 on a Friday. And so as you start to pull in these segmentation type items, it allows you to enhance that profile. So now you have a profile and the dining occasion, right? That's only going to augment and accelerate really the value of what you can bring forward to your customers. So as Robert described, we're just going to continually enhance and improve our data schema in order to support the continued uplift of what our industry is trying to accomplish. It's all about business outcomes.
Yep,
and at the end of the day, I mean, I think we've talked about this before. I mean, we know marketing departments are creating customer personas for, events and whatever initiatives they're doing. So, we're trying to standardize some of that and all the information and data and where it could come from. And then like technographics, I mean, it's getting down to technology and, what do they use? Are they a mobile user? Are they a desktop user? Do they like specials? Do they actually react to those and take advantage of them? So when you're testing the market and whatnot, you can be more specific and more accurate. And at the end of the day, you have more information to develop those specific customer personas for targeting purposes and marketing initiatives.
Excellent. All right, so I'm gonna ask this question of the two brands, even though it's a solution provider question. And so Tim and George, why do you think solution providers, the technology providers, should adopt this standard?
Why do they share the what?
Why? So I was gonna ask Stephen and myself this question of like, why should we adopt, why should Oracle, why should AWS adopt this standard? But I really want to get it from your perspective as a user of our technology, the industry hour. Why is it important that the solution providers that you engage with adopt this standard?
Honestly, we're a relatively small shop, when it comes to support staff. We're kind of lean and mean. So I don't like having to reinvent the wheel. So this has become something I'm pushing for to be a checklist whenever we're talking to a new vendor. Are you a member of RTN? Are you going to adopt this standard? And if I get a yes, then I feel much better about pushing a product, because I know that first, they share my values, and second, they respect my time. And so having this makes it much easier, much more targeted effort on my part.
Excellent. Tim, same question.
I agree exactly with George. It's, when you go to these vendors, you want to make sure that they're on the same page as you are and what you're looking for. You don't want to have to reinvent the wheel and spend, 4 to 6 months of just learning the system. If we're going off a single standard, we know what data we want to collect, and we want to make sure that we can get through the test phase and get right into production and start collecting the data and itemizing it the way we've determined it to be.
Oh, great, thank you. I wanted to make sure that all the solution providers on the call had a chance to hear it directly from the mouth of the brand, or the voice of the brand. So this is the last question, and we'll probably get a little bit personal here. So what does it take to be on a work group? What's the time commitment? What has it meant for each of us? Why do we do this? What's that all about? So just from a time management standpoint, I probably spend 2 to 4 hours a month. It's usually an hour every week. A single work group goes every other week. So if you're just in a single work group, it tends to be an hour every other week. It's a matter of just showing up for the hour and contributing. Occasionally we have some homework assignments that we get involved with, where we go off on our own and gather some more info and bring it back to the team. We do at times break out into some smaller groups to do that as well. But from a time commitment, it's relatively small for the benefit that the industry is having. From that, though, I want to ask the question of each of you too, personally, what it means to you to be involved here. And I'll start. I'll try not to go too deep, but this is something that's really near and dear to me, and something I didn't recognize until my father passed away a couple years ago. Going through that journey, there were so many people. My dad was an architect. He was an architect his entire life. And there were people that came to me and shared with me how much he contributed to architecture, both in the San Francisco Bay Area and in California. He volunteered on architectural review boards. He taught at high schools as on a volunteer basis. He just was really involved in the community. I didn't recognize it as much when I was growing up, but I was amazed. And even after his passing, he kept receiving awards for the amount of volunteer time he spent. And it was amazing. It was amazing to see his legacy and the things that he did. And it was so unselfish. And yet it was so rewarding, not only as a son, but, for my mom and for the family. And more importantly, for architecture as an industry, and also for housing as an industry. So with that said, I was already involved with RTN, but I certainly turned it up a little bit. And it just warms my heart. I'd love to be able to give back. You've often heard me say, or hear me post, or see me post, that we serve an industry that serves others. And we will all do better if we contribute and we knock down the silos of the competitive pieces that don't need to be there. We will always compete as solution providers out in the field, but the things that we can provide to this industry together, the consultants, the solution providers, and the brands, it's amazing. We want to leapfrog our sister industries, retail, lodging, travel. We want to be better than they are. There is so much guest engagement every single day. Pretty much everyone needs to eat 3 times a day across our globe, and that's a lot of guest engagement. So we want to be able to accommodate that. That's personally why I'm here at RTN and why I spend as much time as I do. I love the work and I love to get back to the industry. With that, I will pass that over to Stephen. Let's go to you.
First of all, thank you for sharing a beautiful personal story. So we deeply appreciate it. I'll be short and just mirror what you shared. How many opportunities in your life do you get to actually create industry standards? It's unfortunate that our industry hasn't had them for the last 100+ years, but what a once in a lifetime opportunity we have to actually be part of that foundation and to create that legacy like you described.
Yep.
Yeah, and for me, you know, I was in the laboratory industry years ago with Quest Diagnostics and WebMD, and we set the standards for HL7 interfaces, results interfaces. Before, it was similar to the restaurant, what you guys were mentioning about the individual. Each interface was a big project and cost a bunch of money, and then the cloud came. So for me, it resonates a little bit from that, and then also I spent some time in the industry, and I really like the people in the industry. I've been in lots of different industries. You still do consult across all industries, but you know, back probably in 2014, 15, I was with a digital menu board company, and I really got to know people in the industry. Obviously, I eat out all the time. You guys know that, but from a personal, professional level, working with people in the industry, I just haven't run across anyone like the people in the industry. How nice, smart, hardworking, different backgrounds, you name it. And so that's what really resonates with me.
Thank you. Tim?
You know, I came from state government and I worked with the multi-state ISAC and I worked on several work groups with that. So when Patrick asked me to join a work group, I was very interested in it. And then I've joined several work groups since. But it's also, you know, building the relationships, George, so I can reach out to George if I need something or a question on something that's going on, not, you know, in competitive or anything, just what are you using for technology? What are you doing this? Can you guide me to somebody in your organization that can help me with it? But you build the relationships up and you also learn with everybody, you know, working with Robert, Stephen, you know, you learn more in the conversations that you have when you're on these calls. You learn something you might not know, or you like, oh, I never even thought of that. It gives you a different perspective on your thinking and your business guidance in these work groups. And like you said, you get a sense of belonging and you're helping guide something and building something that from scratch. So it's a really rewarding experience. And I suggest the other brands to get involved. I mean, even if you just sit on the calls and listen and participate when you can, you'll learn a lot just by getting on these calls.
Excellent. Thank you. George, I'm going to go to you and then Christopher, you can finish it up.
Sorry, as restaurateurs, we are in the business to serve people in one form or fashion.
I need you to lean in again, George.
Sorry, I was going to say, as restaurants, we're in the business to serve people in some form or fashion. And this lets me not only serve the industry, but it helps me not be siloed in my thoughts. And you guys have kicked some of my preconceptions to the curb every once in a while, which has been nothing but healthy for me. So I really appreciate all that outside input and all the camaraderie building something together. So it's been great.
Excellent. Christopher.
So I've spent 50 years in this industry. The first half of my career as an operator and the second half as a technologist. So the opportunity to give back is rewarding. And I think, you know, in both halves of my career would have been really helpful to have had standards to work with. And so the opportunity that we can create that standard that everybody can take advantage of, I think is very rewarding for me.
Excellent. And with that, Angela, I'm going to bounce it back to you for closings.
Thank you. I can't say thank you enough to the team here. I mean, all of your work and dedication to this, and also just presenting it to the industry so well on this call. We will make this webinar available to the entire industry along with the standard which we presented today. You can scan this QR code to access all of the standards we have become live with, along with best practices, technology guidance in the form of the categories you see here. If you're a member, you have total full access. If you're not a member of RTN yet, all of our standards are always full access. Some of the other tools might be members only, but we welcome you to join us and become members of RTN. Help us move this work forward with the great teams you've seen on the call today. Again, Robert, can't thank you enough for moderating, and everyone on the panel, thank you for your time. Thank you to everyone who joined us today, and be on the lookout for phase 2. Please join us in our efforts moving forward. And thank you to everyone for all of your dedication and time towards this and all the other RTN initiatives that we push forward. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a great week. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank
Stay
you.
well, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.